Alright, I had a chance to run the car after all that buildup. So, this is basically what I wound up doing. In this case, you can see I actually wound up putting the servo facing forward like this, and it's actually pretty good. It's nice because you're not having the tie rods moving up and down in terms of every time the servo horn moves, it's not moving up and down, which is actually kind of probably a good thing. The other thing too is, if you can see, the tie rods are fairly level. That's not necessarily the case when you run the servo facing forward, as they show in the instructions. So probably this isn't a bad way to go. Car seemed like it steered pretty good. A little bit hard to tell because running the car, it kind of shows some of the same things it showed last year when we tried rubber tires on carpet, or I should say the Tamiya rubber tires on carpet. Tamiya rubber tires tend to pick up some junk. I don't know if you can really see the fuzz that it picked up. This is straight off the track. You can see the fuzz that it picked up. Not as bad on this tire. I think it's, I'm not sure why this other tire was picking up more than the other, but they all picked up a little bit of the carpet fibers. And the thing was, to the track I was at, basically in a warehouse, so it's not real warm. There was like 45 degrees, and had we been running on in a regular heated building, it probably would have been actually even more prone to pick stuff up. I noticed it gets better as far as the tires go. They get better as far as picking off the track. If you run them in for a while, if you run the tires outside or something like that, but I don't know what the deal is exactly. Why the Tamiya tires are so sticky in terms of that. I mean, I know you can buy like ride tires or whatever, so are supposed to work better. These ones, the Tamiya ones, are just always the same kind of deal. Or they want to take all the fuzz and the garbage off the track. That being said, I found a few things out which were probably pretty good. On carpet, anyway, as far as the front camber, I just kept adding camber on the car, and the more camber I added, the better the car turned. A lot of times, what I was getting when I first started off, I started off with actually the absolute minimum, the plastic camber plate versus this aluminum one. It had very little mid-corner steering. You were kind of like turning, and then there was actually times I was just hitting the brakes to make the car turn. So eventually I kind of went up in steps and wound up at the max, which was 2.5, and that actually made the car turn fairly hard. The other thing too is I know that it was being affected by the fact that these tires were picking up gunk off the track, because before they got glazed over, the car was really, really good. It was really stuck, and then you do 5-6 laps, and by then it started picking the junk off the track, and it really wasn't so hot. So that's the one problem with this car on carpet. In the end, it's probably the best thing to do is just to run foams, because rubber tires just kind of stink on it. I mean, unfortunately that's the way it is. That, and the other thing too is I tried to keep the rear end fairly low. This is not 100% all the way down, but it's pretty far down there. I think the ride height's like 4.5 in the back, and then I got it down to 4 in this area You know, where you're talking about just where this is center is it's 4, so it's actually motorboating a little bit. And the front's higher. The front's like 4.5, 5. Which in a low traction is probably the way to go, because it was actually fairly low traction. You know, I was still running the Gold Springs. You know it's low traction when the car pushes and it wants to spin out, which is basically what was going on, at least at first. So we're just trying to put some traction into the car. The other thing too is I added weight here, you know, and here, and then I also added some on the side of the receiver, kind of to balance out. You know, there's a large metal heatsink on this one, so I put it on balancing balls, like kind of similar like with the X-ray. The X-ray sells like a balancing spike post, whatever you want to call it, and IRS sells a similar thing, which I use. You can actually put it like here and here, and it works out fairly well. And you can put the balancers in, and it'll kind of hold the car, and you can, you know, let it rock till it, and kind of mock up the weight until you get where you want, and that seems like it helps out. I also ran 1/2 ounce right here in the front of the car. You can see that's to get some weight over the nose and make the car turn. At one point I actually had a whole ounce over the nose of the car, and that was too much. The car would actually just kind of like stay dug into the turn, and it wasn't as responsive. You kind of got to play around with it because it's sensitive enough to where you put it in the right area, it helps you out. Now, the other thing too is I was running a regular size battery pack. I have a smaller LiPo battery from like a Revo 16 scale car, which is actually, you know, it weighs 95 grams or something like that. This weighs like 250 grams. So there's a huge weight difference. But again, because of low traction, you want to run the heavier weight in the car. It sounds counterintuitive, but unless you have, the higher the traction goes, the more weight you can take off the car. You know, the more, if you were running foam tires on a black groove track, you'd run that little battery and about as little, you probably run no weight on the car, most likely. But in this case, the weight actually helps, because these cars don't weigh anything in the first place. You know, I think we were measuring them last year at one of the TCS races, and they were like between 900 and 1100 grams, depending on what you had on the car and the battery and all that stuff. I mean, it's hilarious how little they weigh. So that's, you know, basically it. The other thing too is I saw some guys mentioning, you want to have the pod free on a message board. I think it was one of the, I was looking at my pages from some guys from Ottawa. Yeah, it's true. You got to have the pod, it has to be free. I mean, really, what you want to do is have. You can see these wires. First off, these are like 16 gauge wires. You don't want to run anything heavier than that. I mean, you're not gonna. There's no way a 540 motor is pulling anything we need to run like 14 or 12 gauge. And when you put the body on the car, this body's never cooperates too much, but when you put the body on the car, you just want to get, like, I kind of cut out a little bit back here. Let's see if I can get this on here the right way. There we go. I kind of have a loop sticking out. That's like a major thing. So that there's, you know, some you don't have to be probably as large as this, but you need something to make sure the car can move around and not do anything, you know, crazy. I know when at the TCS finals where you have to run their connectors. That was another thing too. You had to be cognizant of what, especially you had to be cognizant of the wires, because the problem was the wires they give you on those motors are vinyl coated, crappy, non-flexible wires. So you sort of have to pay attention to how you have your wires fed up to the connector. But that's pretty much it for the rundown on the electronics. I didn't do anything special. The other thing too is, in case you're having a problem with the stupid Tamiya hold down, you can always, I was just sticking a piece of foam in here to kind of keep the battery from moving. Although I guess it's not illegal. That's not legal for TCS, but sometimes it's easier to do than fooling with that battery retainer they give you. So that's mostly it. You just want to keep everything sort of out of the way. I ran the servo wire back onto the servo back here, so it's kind of takes about all the wire that comes with the servo. And that's it. Really not too much else to say. That's your typical race car. Again, the only thing that I really did different than anything else was just mounting the servo like this, and I sort of like how the arms stay level. It doesn't really have any bump steer or anything like that, so it worked out well.